Disney hired fake animators just to trick us. It's crazy. They built an entire studio and filled it with people just to look busy. Real quick, let me explain. So back in the day, Disney really celebrated its animation legacy. This is when they were killing the game with animated hit after hit after hit. To give us fans an inside look into the process of making an animated movie, Disney decided to do something unusual. Make an entire fake animation studio at Disney World. Basically,
originally it was conceived as a stop in the tour of the animation attraction, and you would look through these windows and you would see animators working, and they were just going to be people, like, I think for the most part, pretending to do things.
Things changed when the Disney executives realized the artists they hired to be pretend animators could actually animate, and that's when things got crazy. So Disney would give them small scenes on major movies to animate, and the artists got better and better, and eventually, Disney was so impressed that they let them make their own movies. This small, quote-unquote, pretend studio went on to make some Disney classics, like Mulan and even Lilo and Stitch. Do you remember that scene in Coraline when we meet her dad for the first time? Well, Hollywood executives hated it, and here's why. So let's go back. So take a look at when Coraline is talking to her dad. He's not really paying attention, so she grabs the door and does this. It's a quick little funny scene, but it caused a lot of problems behind the scenes. So Coraline was a hard movie to make. The director, Henry Selick, is a stop-motion animation legend. He wanted to do something completely different, and the studios did not like it.
It was considered too scary for kids, not scary enough for older teens and adults.
However, studios had real problems with moments like the door scene because they thought it was boring.
Executives are scared. They say, make it go faster.
Most animated films for kids are loud and frantic. But with Coraline, they chose to take time and let scenes breathe for a very important reason.
But we have our slower moments. There's time for ideas to sink in.
When Coraline is hanging on the door and the door is just going squeak, and it allows your brain to go, oh my God, that is what it's like to be a child. And if you don't allow there to be pace that's slower, you'll miss that entirely.
It shows that it's not a formulaic film.
The first reaction to Adventure Time was hilarious. The studio executives were absolutely stunned.
Because I was like, Adventure Time, come on, grab your friends. And they were like,
this guy had no idea what he was doing.
I was just lucky. I'd never pitched before to a studio.
But here's the incredible story of how he tricked himself into making a hit animated show. So this is Penn Ward. At the time, he was a cartoonist looking for work. He wanted to create shows but had a huge problem. He never wants to work on what he should be working on, even when it's his own show.
I'll work on other drawing projects. When I'm supposed to be drawing for Adventure Time, I'll make comic books.
Basically, he's the king of procrastination. And the only way to get something done is to have a deadline. In order to come up with the idea for Adventure Time, he cranked up the pressure and did something crazy. Luckily, it worked out. He kind of did things backwards.
I can only work under pressure. I had to come up with an idea. I was scheduling pitches without an idea, and then I would try to hit, that was my deadline, to come up with something and then pitch it. The deadline, when the deadline happens, I'll just crank all night.
Let me know if you also need a deadline to get things done. Why Disney's best animator quit the company and never drew again. Disney has changed a lot over the years, but they did something that this artist couldn't stand.
I quit the dream job.
Do you agree with her reasonings? So this is Ellen Woodbury, and she's a Disney animation legend. She started out as an assistant, but her work was so good that she quickly got promoted. Here are some of her characters. Do you recognize them? Eventually, she became the first female supervising animator at Disney, which is a big deal. She created Zazu from The Lion King and Pegasus from Hercules. She even worked on movies like Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons. She was one of Disney Animation's best animators, so why did she quit? Well, it's actually really simple. Disney changed. They stopped making hand-drawn movies. At first, she liked CGI, but after a few years, it became boring, so she left.
So I was a computer animator for 5 years. I was tremendously into it. Somewhere along the line, it occurred to me that it was more fun to be a sculptor. So in 2005, I quit the dream job and I invented myself as a stone sculptor.
Disney Animation has a huge problem. I'm not talking about sequels or box office flops. The real problem is Disney animators can't stop drawing handsome men. It's crazy. The good guys are hot. The bad guys are hot. Even the animals are hot, apparently. It turns out Disney animators have a secret method to making sure their leading men are as handsome as possible. Let me explain. So over the last century, Disney has perfected the formula for making animated fairy tales. You need music and magic, and most importantly, a good romance. So that's why they spend a lot of time making the men look good. And ladies and some dudes all over the world have noticed. So there are two ways they designed them. sometimes an animator combines a bunch of handsome men together, like with Aladdin.
Tom Cruise was a big influence on Aladdin. He has that little devilish grin, and also based him a little bit on Michael J. Fox character. Of course, he had to be the handsome, heroic character, so I based him a lot on myself.
Other times, they have a more collaborative approach. Back in the day, a bunch of women at Disney were called into a meeting to help decide what the new prince would look like. After hours of heated debate, they finally came together to perfect the design of Flynn from Tangled. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories. Remember Madagascar? Well, I found the original character designs, and I can't tell if they're hilarious or cursed. I'm just glad they changed it. When you make an animated movie, it takes time to get the characters to look right. Shrek started like this, Stitch started like this, and Jasmine looked like this. As time goes on, the artist will often try to make the characters look like the actor who is voicing them. And normally it works, but for Madagascar, the results were interesting. So they decided on the character designs for Marty, Alex, and whatever the giraffe's name was, way before the actors were cast. But for Gloria the hippo, they changed her depending on who was in talks to play her. And they had a bunch of different actresses in mind, like her or her. But when they added J-Lo's features, things got weird. And only the production designer, Kendall Cronkite, thought so.
Originally, she was J-Lo, and her design, we had a huge butt on her. We did, but when she turned around, her tail was here, which means that half of her body was like a butt crack. It was unbelievable. So everybody else seemed to be fine, but I couldn't live with it. We had to change it.
Cuphead animators struggled.
You were suffering for 4 years.
Here's why this simple character was this animator's worst nightmare.
It is the worst assignment I had on Cuphead.
So real quick, this is Tina Naraki. She's a Cuphead animator. She animated all her characters on pencil and paper the old school way. As you can see, she's good. Like, really good. But not every character was fun to animate. This is Mr. Chimes. And he was a huge problem. She has made her hilarious beef with this animated monkey well known.
I hate this monkey with a fiery passion.
I'll let her explain. Let me know if you agree.
He has this stupid face, and he has to rotate freakishly slowly, a freakishly little amount like this. That was such a bit. Okay, so he's rotating like this. Okay, fine. Okay, but now he's rotating closed. Oh, now he needs to go from the closed to the open while rotating. Oh, now he has to have a transition from this to attack. Oh, now he has to transition from that to attack. And I just hated him so much.
And the best part of the story is that after painstakingly animating this character, she was able to get revenge.
So killing him was the most amazing assignment I've had, and it felt so good.
Remember this scene from The Incredibles 2? Check out the shirt. It didn't always look this good. This is the way Mr. Incredible's shirt looked before. There were too many wrinkles, it was too baggy, and the collar was jumping around all over the place. It looked bad. But this artist and her team fixed it. This is Fran Kilal, and she is a cloth and simulation technical director at Pixar, which basically means she's the real-life Edna Mode. She designs and tailors clothes for animated characters. There's tons of complex nerd stuff like math and science involved to make the clothes move, but by combining it with art and fashion, the end results are always incredible. You need to start paying attention to costumes in Pixar movies. Trust me, they are way cooler than you realized. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories. This Pixar animator panicked when he forgot how to animate.
I just can't animate. I don't understand what's wrong with me.
When his boss found out, things got intense.
This is it. This is where they're gonna fire me.
The story is crazy. So real quick, this guy is Michael Makarowicz. He worked at Pixar on The Incredibles and Cars, but when he was working on Ratatouille, there was a huge problem. It's everyone's dream to work at Pixar, so once he got there, Makarowicz worked non-stop to always improve. One day, he realized he couldn't animate anymore.
I lost all artistic capability. It just went away.
That's like if Superman forgot how to fly, or Spider-Man forgot how to dance. And when he tried to fix it, nothing worked. So he did what any of us would do in that situation. Tried to hide it. He acted like he was busy, he avoided meetings, hid out in his office. After weeks of hiding out, the film's director finally called him into a meeting.
Oh, pretty sure I'm getting fired.
But the meeting took an unexpected turn. When the director found out how much he was struggling, he helped him realize that he was overworked, which resulted into a major art block.
Where I couldn't animate. Because I was overworked and I didn't realize it. I went to school like 6 in the morning. I came back at 1 in the morning. Then when I got to Pixar, I did that exact same thing until Ratatouille, which was another 3 or 4 years. And I never took vacation. I just didn't take care of myself. And my brain said, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. By slowly kind of like taking a break, taking it easy and talking to somebody, that artistry sort of came back to me. And I made it through the movie. And then as soon as the movie was done, I took like 3 months off.
Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories.
Pixar animators found something they couldn't animate, and it caused major problems. They've made toys and monsters and other weird stuff, but back in the day, even though humans were hard to get right, turns out they really struggled to make cars. I know, it's crazy. They seem simple, but oh boy, it was not. Take a look at this early animation test. Looks good, right? Nope, the director hated it for one simple reason. The cars move like cartoons. A real car can't do this or this, and they wanted to make them seem realistic. I mean, besides the whole having eyes and teeth thing. But realistic animation created another problem.
Hard thing about Cars was figuring out how to emote with these characters that were essentially just heads on four wheels.
Realistically moving cars aren't very entertaining, but by making small but genius changes, they created some of the studio's most iconic characters.
So rather than focusing on the fact that they don't have arms and legs, you focus on what they do have. You try to study each character and also study what's unique about that model car. The sheriff, the way that his suspension was really soft and his tire pressure was much lower.
We had to become even better experts at animating faces.
You remember the ending for Monsters, Inc., right? Of course you do. It's iconic. But this scene is actually way more unusual than you realize. So let's go back. At the end of Monsters, Inc., Sully and Mike rebuild Boo's door. Sully enters the room, and while we get to see the excitement on his face, we don't actually get to see Boo. It's a perfect ending, but test audiences really hated it. They wanted to see what happened after Boo and Sully were reunited. Then, director Pete Docter did something unusual. The ending scene wasn't satisfying to the test audiences because they were just showing the rough storyboard version. The director knew that it would work way better once it was actually animated. But they had to get that moment right. If it wasn't perfect, this scene could ruin the whole movie. The director, Pete Docter, decided that the best person to animate this would be himself. He was an animator before, so it wasn't completely out of the blue. It's unusual because directors on big animated movies typically don't animate for their movies. But luckily, he did. As Sully's face slowly lights up, it just fills you with joy. This scene from The Incredibles was absolutely unhinged. I am so glad they changed it. Real quick, here's how we almost got a very different version of this classic scene. Okay, so we've all watched The Incredibles. It has so many awesome scenes that you forget that it's really hard to make an animated movie. And for every amazing scene, there's a bad one that did not make the cut. Now, normally we don't see the work in progress stuff, but during an interview, a Pixar animator explained how they begged the director to change one small moment in the movie. Do you agree with him? I'll let him explain.
There's a scene at the end where Violet's got her confidence now and she meets Tony Reidinger and he's trying to ask her out on a date. You know, he starts stammering over his dialogue. When he starts stammering, she actually leans over and gives him like a little kiss to shut him up. And at some point, you know, someone says, "You really think she would kiss him in this situation?" And everybody's on the room's all, no, she wouldn't kiss him. You know, she's like a fair 14-year-old girl. She would never do that. She's all right, well, what if she slapped him? And someone just said, just have her like put her finger on his mouth and say, shh, you know, I like movies. It's like, okay, go with that, try that. And it worked out.
Remember the time an ex-Pixar employee went rogue and posted the studio's secrets? It was crazy. It went super viral and changed how everyone saw Pixar movies. Pixar is an elite studio. Their movies are so good, usually, because they all have one thing in common. And no, it's not thick moms. It's really good stories. At Pixar, they spend years writing and rewriting their stories over and over and over again. So story is the most important thing. And at Pixar, they even have a saying,
Story is king.
So the internet exploded when a Pixar employee left the studio and dropped this. It's a list of the rules Pixar uses to make their stories. It was juicy, and of course, it went viral. But there was a huge problem. All the rules like this and this and this were really cool, but turns out it was fake. Kelsey Mann, the dude who directed Inside Out 2, had to show the real way Pixar makes movies. In an old interview, he basically says the rules the artist published were just things that she believed and aren't used by Pixar as a whole. Because there are no rules that determine how Pixar movies are made, all their movies have different processes. So let me know in the comments, did you see that list and was it helpful for you?
Working at Pixar was an absolute nightmare.
I couldn't take being tortured like that.
The behind-the-scenes struggles got so bad, this legendary animator left the studio and disappeared from the industry for 10 years.
I kind of just sort of stepped away. It was one of the worst days of my life.
Okay, so let's go back. This dude is Henry Selick. He directed this and other stop-motion bangers. But after the massive success of Coraline, Pixar agreed to make his next project. But they had one rule.
The deal was if I could make this film for this much money, they'd support it artistically.
The movie could have been great. The idea was awesome.
It was called The Shadow King, a kid with the longest fingers in the world. He's taught to make hand shadows, and he can bring them to life.
But during production, he got to see that working for Pixar wasn't what he thought.
John Lasseter, who was in charge, he kept asking for change after change after change, to the point where the budget was going to creep up and go beyond what we'd agreed, and they shut it down.
But the story gets even crazier from there. Years later, after the management at Pixar changed, something unexpected happened.
That's a film that I might pick up again because I got the rights back from Disney to The Shadow King.
This Shrek scene is iconic, but was almost impossible to make. The animators struggled for years before changing one tiny detail that allowed them to finish the scene. When the first Shrek came out, CGI animation was still super new. The technology was very unreliable. One wrong click of the mouse, and this would turn into this, or this. But that didn't stop DreamWorks. They were determined to push things to the limits. Liquids were hard to do, but they did scenes like this. Clothes were hard to do, but they had characters dressed like this. The one thing they struggled with was hair. Hair was really hard. But Fiona's hair was impossible. They spent a year trying to perfect her long, flowy hair, but it was just too complicated. So they got a new idea. Change the hair. Instead of trying to recreate millions of individual hairs, they gave Fiona her iconic ponytail.
DreamWorks Animation lost $80 million on this movie, but the animation is straight fire. Puss in Boots came out and it was super awesome. The animation, the story, and humor were all great. Last year, Disney followed it up with Ruby Gillman, an animated movie that basically no one saw. Guys, it was the lowest grossing DreamWorks animated movie ever. But to be honest, the animation is pretty cool. They really pushed the animation technology to produce the wiggly, fluid art style. Let's have producer Kelly Cooney explain.
When we started designing Ruby and gave her these very tubular shapes, we really wanted to be able to highlight the contrast of how she moved when she was trying to stand up straight and fit in with the humans, and then how she would appear underwater, which would be super fluid and at home. Normally, you've got points for all the different joints, but they created 9,000 points so that they could move her arm and have it have that very fluid, curvy bend to all of her movements.
Remember that scene in Shrek 2 when we meet Puss in Boots for the first time? Well, it always bothered me as a kid, and here's why. So take a look. When Puss in Boots first arrives, he jumps down from the tree, and we see him looking all Zorro-y. He's got the boots, he's got the hat, he's got the cape, and then he quickly throws the cape away and attacks Shrek. It's a really funny scene, but I've always noticed how after that moment, we never see Puss in Boots with his cape ever again. Check it out. In this scene, no cape. In this scene, hats, boots, no cape. In this scene, no cape. Even at the end, no cape. It's been bothering me for 20 years, and I finally figured out why. So we gotta remember, Shrek 2 was made in 2004, which in terms of CGI technology is like the Stone Ages. Back then, the animators would try to make something look like this, press a wrong button, and it would end up looking like this. But back then, some of the hardest things to do were fur, water, and cloth. So when it came to animating Puss in Boots' cape, they couldn't do it. So the animators were able to do it for a couple scenes, but figured out it was too hard and just had him get rid of it. Who needs a cape? I'm glad they kept the shoes though. DreamWorks animators really struggled to make this beard.
Stoic's beard is the most challenging beard we have ever done here at the studio.
When you see how hilariously bad things could have turned out, you'll understand why getting this little detail right was so important. Alright, let's go back. So the How to Train Your Dragon movies are known for dragons, but can we take a second to appreciate the glorious, majestic, and luscious beards? They look great, but they cause a lot of problems. As we know, the best characters are always bald, and that's because in CGI, hair is the hardest thing to do. It's always funny to see how animators over the years have struggled with it. At Disney, at Pixar, everywhere. It's hard. So when they were making dragons, they knew it would be a huge challenge. One of the main characters' beard was especially challenging, but they had to figure it out.
With Stoic, we wanted to make sure that he looked impressive. That beard is certainly part of giving him that authority.
To pull it off, they developed a whole new technology called Smoosh, and one guy ended up programming it all.
Sean Nolan was the one that did the rigging on the beard, and he worked for months on this.
It's crazy how so much work goes into such tiny details, but they figured it out, and I'm glad they did, because Stoic without his beard would have looked weird. 5x 3D animation was inspired by 2D animation. Up first, we have Luca. They really wanted to give the movie a hand-drawn feel, so they did stuff like this. Adding multiple limbs is a common thing to show movement in 2D, but not in 3D. Number 2 is the Nicelanders from Wreck-It Ralph. The animators wanted to make them move like old video game characters, so they kept their movement very limited and choppy. It seems like it would be easier, but for some animators, it was actually harder to get right. Number 3 is when Disney went all out to make a film that looked 2D, but was actually 3D. Alright, this short is underrated, but they wanted to make it look like a comic strip, and I think they nailed it. They even had those little dot printing patterns. Number 4 is Mutant Mayhem. The film has a sketchy style that was inspired by high school notebook doodles, which I love. It's a really unique look. I love the imperfections and the scribbles around the characters and all that good stuff. And number 5 is another Pixar movie. I have an entire video on it, so click below, but Pixar was really inspired by anime to make Turning Red, and it actually caused a lot of problems. Turns out, when you see animated characters from different angles, it's horrifying.
Here are 3 more horrifying behind-the-scenes images of some of your favorite animation. So Mario is known for some pretty cartoony and goofy animation, but in Mario Wonder, they took it to a next level. While the game looks fun and innocent and happy, to achieve that look, you had to do this. Remember this scene from Encanto? Well, we saw it like this, but in the animation software, it looked like this. Those long arms are crazy, but not as crazy as how the characters from Oddballs looked. So this show had a really simple style, but don't be fooled. The character Max was super goofy, but inside the animation program, he looked like this.
So I got this sad DM from a fan. They were upset because they didn't get hired for an internship. They worked hard on their portfolio, but ultimately didn't get the job. I completely understand the pain. So getting a job in animation is harder than ever. To land a gig though, it is essential you learn this very important skill, and that is how to handle rejection. I'm gonna let Steve Hickner, the director of B-Movie, explain. His mindset will hopefully change the way you see rejection. Just check this out.
I've just written a book and now I'm going out and I'm gonna get all these rejection letters from all the people who don't want to publish it. Here's the great thing. I only have to get one yes. If I were playing baseball and I went 0 for 49, I'd be in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, if that. But in this world, I can go 0 for 49 and go 1 for 50 and I win.
I just discovered the jiggliest character in animation, and I can't stop laughing. So this is a villain from the movie Spies in Disguise. So he starts out with this muscular sumo wrestler body, then he gets zapped, and his body gets turned into goo. At first, the script only needed him to be jiggly for like 2 shots, and the animation team didn't know if they could do something like that. But the animation tests were so good, they expanded the scene to show more. Creating a droopy and floppy human in CGI is a struggle. First, they animated the shots in 2D to make sure the effect looked good. And then they tried to copy that in the computer. They created so much new technology and software to pull this off that it's incredible. I've never seen Spies in Disguise, but I definitely have to check it out now. There better be more awesome animation just like this in the movie. While it's awesome to see all the hard work, it's so sad that the studio that made this movie was shut down. R.I.P. Big studios pay these animators to make terrible animation. So I found the funniest part of making any animated movie. Here's some rare footage of 3 iconic movie moments before they were done, and it's way too funny not to share. Okay, so CGI technology has advanced so much that movies look more believable than ever. Studios like Pixar, Disney, and DreamWorks make animated movies that look amazing, with great animation, beautiful colors, and dynamic lighting. Since we are so used to seeing the final product, it's always hilarious to see the first step of the process. So before a scene can look like this, it looks like this. Studios hire people called layout artists who make super simple animation to help production teams visualize the movie before the actual animators start working. Now, their work is rough, but also hilarious. Remember You're Welcome from Moana? In layout form, it looked like this. When fully animated, Sully's intense dramatic stare looked like this. But before, it was this. Remember this from The Incredibles 2? This is the layout version. Their work looks funny compared to the final, but layout artists are an important part of the filmmaking process. Disney Animation Studios says, working from storyboards, layout artists use a film's characters, sets, props, and cameras to stage, block, and shoot the film, shot by shot. Cinematography, staging, and rough character animation are key elements to a layout artist's skill set. Additionally, layout involves a bit of animation, lighting, editing, modeling, and a lot of composition and good use of camera for a clear narrative, making it a very creative endeavor. There are tons of different jobs in animation that aren't actually animators. You can Google animation production pipelines to explore more roles on an animated production. This guy is the most unlucky animator of all time. This is the hilarious story about how an animator wasted 3 months animating a scene in Roger Rabbit. So let's go back. You remember Roger Rabbit, right? It was a movie that combined humans and 2D cartoons. Now, back in the day, that was really hard to do. There were no computers, so everything was done by hand.
The most amazing technology was I got a fax machine halfway through.
While all the other animators were drawing fun scenes like this and this, one guy got stuck animating a bottle falling off of a shelf. Simple, right? Turns out this scene was deceptively challenging because the bottle had to look 3D and move in perspective. The animator spent countless hours on the scene, but when he showed it to the director, there was a huge mistake. So yeah, he had to redo the entire scene.
The whole shot had to be redone. And it was a very elaborate hand-drawn shot because its perspective is moving. It was all done by hand, and it was all done in London, and they spelled the word chili wrong. It had 2 L's in it. The whole shot had to be redone.
This is the sad truth behind why so many cartoon creators voice their own characters. Did you know that Walt Disney was the original voice of Mickey Mouse?
Hey, Poodle! Here she comes!
In recent years, it's become even more common for the creators to voice the characters on their cartoon shows. Seth MacFarlane, J.G. Quintel, Alex Hirsch, Trey Parker, Matt Stone are just some of the creators who have roles on their shows. While it's usually just for fun, this trend actually exposes a darker side of the animation industry. Sometimes the reason creators have to do this is because Hollywood doesn't pay them. Once a studio buys your show, you don't own it, so you gotta find other ways to benefit from the production. In a 2011 article, Dan Povenmire, creator of Phineas and Ferb and also voice of Dr. Doofenshmirtz, was reported to have explained it like this.
He quintuple dips into the production to get this fair share because he is not getting any points, percentage of the gross profits, from Disney. He advised my class that you need to have several talents to make the bucks in this situation. He produces the show, storyboards, writes. He is involved in the production of the songs. He is one of the voices and seems to be prepared to do anything that will give him another paycheck from the production.
It's crazy out there, guys, so please keep that in mind. Even as a successful animator, you still gotta hustle, you still gotta grind, you still gotta find ways to get your fair share. So this is one of the hardest things to animate. It looks simple, so you might think something like this or this would be harder. But really, even the best animators struggle to draw characters simply thinking. It's a challenge, but here's a mind-blowing example of how legendary Disney animators did it. So we all know animated characters aren't real, thank God. But the magic is how these simple lines on paper come together to create living characters that can do anything from this to this, or even this. Blinking and breathing help show life. But thinking is also really important. Well, most of the time. Sometimes characters are just dumb. To make his characters seem real, this Disney animator was inspired by real life.
We had to do an awful lot of work trying to work out how the bear would act, what gestures he would use. And I knew a guy in the army who used to scratch his chest when he was thinking.
This next one is crazy. Notice how the animator shows detailed thoughts with just a few subtle drawings. It's so good. Great animators always make the complicated things look so easy. This is the hilarious story of why Baymax's face is so simple.
Circle, circle, line, done. There's his face.
So Disney movies always try to create something new that the audience hasn't seen before. Snow White was the first animated feature, Beauty and the Beast mixed 2D and 3D, stuff like that. But the team behind Big Hero 6 had a huge challenge of creating a robot that wasn't like WALL-E or C-3PO or any other iconic movie robot. They struggled a lot. They went through hundreds of designs until they discovered soft robotics, which are basically squishy robots that are used in medicine to help patients. The animators were like, awesome, now what should his face look like? And the director was like, just draw 2 dots in a line. So it turns out he was in a temple in Japan. He looked up and saw this bell and thought it'd be the perfect face for Baymax.
Snapped a couple photos, and I brought it back to the studio and gave it to our character designer and said, there's his face. He's like, okay, circle, circle, line, done, you know?
Dracula's head is shaped like a coffin, and my mind is officially blown. Hotel Transylvania is known for its zany animation style. The characters dance like this, move like this, and if you pause, you'll most likely stop on a crazy frame like this. Here's how the animators push the animation. The first pass of a scene would look like this. It's cool, but kind of, basic. The director would draw over the animation to push it and make it even more extreme. So in this shot, he repositioned Dracula's body to make the pose less realistic, but way more cartoony. These little details make things from good to great. The animation style is a lot different from a lot of CGI films at that time. Back then, it was more popular to go for a more realistic kind of look. Having a more stylized look was way more fun because it let the artists be more creative with the designs. For example, with Dracula's head.
Dracula sleeps in coffins, right? So we thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun? We could make his head shaped like a coffin. And so we started to do drawings of a little bit more coffin shape. It took us a few weeks until we kind of got the right feeling.
It's the little character design details like this that are always fun to learn about. If you want to see more behind-the-scenes character design videos, check out this one. We learn the inspiration behind one of Disney Animation's best character designs. Check that out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Marvel executives gave Spider-Man animators the most unusual feedback. This is a hilarious story of how animators almost accidentally forgot Spider-Man's most iconic detail. Okay, so while making the Spider-Man video games, the animation team had to reinvent the Spider-Man design, and quickly learned that creating the perfect Spider-Man isn't easy. This is Jacinda Chu, an artist who designed tons of Spider-Man but had a major problem. Marvel rejected every single option. Some were too skinny, some were too buff, but they were all missing one important detail. What the Marvel executives really meant felt was that he needed more, well, I'll let Jacinda explain.
In particular, they told me that his butt was not big enough.
On Twitter, the creative director explained that they needed to give Spider-Man the sculpted glutes of a gymnast, for story reasons. He even had a saying for how the butt should look.
It should be 2 scoops, as he likes to describe it.
So no one would hire Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch until he added this small little thing to his portfolio, and I think you can use the same technique to get hired. So before he was known for creating the biggest show on Disney Channel, Alex Hirsch started out like all of us, at the bottom. In 2010, he got some amazing advice from a Pixar animator, which he eventually used to jumpstart his career. After attending Cal Arts, he wasn't getting any callbacks or interviews and couldn't figure out why. So he had a professional storyboard artist look over his portfolio, and the insights changed everything for him.
I remember when I was trying to get noticed, I kept working really hard on my individual drawings, and a buddy of mine from Pixar was looking at my thumbnails. He's like, put these in your portfolio. And I'm like, I can't, they're hideous, they're awful. And he's like, but it shows that you're a story man, because that's what story art is. And I swallowed my pride, put them in the portfolio, and I got all these callbacks from places that had never looked at me before because I was showing that I'm doing the process.
If you are really trying to break into the industry and are struggling, maybe you need to add some thumbnails to your portfolio. So here's an example of an artist that has thumbnails in their portfolio. They're on their website, on a separate section, and you can see he breaks down the early thought process for all of his shots. Now, these thumbnails aren't the cleanest drawings, not the prettiest drawings, but just like Alex said, these drawings really help give a sense for this artist's thought process. Making an animated show is such a collaborative process that it's really good to have these so people can see that you're open to ideas and changing them. You aren't just putting down the first thing you have. That is just a quick example of some thumbnails. Add those to your portfolio. In the comments below, let me know what you're struggling with most when it comes to trying to break into the animation industry. I'll see you guys in the next video. This is the secret behind making Big City Greens. The team at Disney TV Animation behind Big City Greens created one of the most popular Disney Channel shows in recent memory. And we all know that making a show like this takes tons of work. There are hundreds of people working on the show every single day. In order to make sure all the storyboard artists are working in the same style, storyboard supervisor Carson Kugler created the storyboarding guide to assist the storyboard artists on Big City Greens. Carson is an industry vet who has worked on shows like SpongeBob and Hey Arnold. He used his experience making those shows to shape the storyboarding style of Big City Greens. The document lays out how artists should plan out sequences and their shots. He explains how detailed the drawings need to be, like in this page, or how to make things visually clear, and so much more. These important tips can be used by all storyboard artists, not just the ones working on Big City Greens. There's a lot of in-depth stuff that a lot of professional storyboard artists have to think about, like how to draw the mouths to show what character is talking, or how to draw the eyes to best express emotion. Of course, there are rules on how to draw the characters walking and how to draw characters in crowds. A lot of shows have these kind of guides to help the crew members out, but they can also help you as you work on your own storyboards. That's all I have for today. Just wanted to let you know this exists. You can go to Carson's website to check out the full document. It's really cool to get a glimpse behind the scenes of such a successful show, so go over and check that out. If you want to see more animation inspiration, check out these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. No one told me this important fact about the animation industry, and that is that character designs are the hardest jobs to get. I didn't know this until recently, but it makes a lot of sense when you actually take a look at the data. So here's a chart that gives a general view of how many jobs there are on a standard animated show production. While there are usually tons of storyboard artists, a lot of shows only need a few character designers to get the job done. So as a result, becoming a character designer is a lot more competitive simply because there are generally less job opportunities available. Now, I'm not saying this to discourage you. I just want you to know what you're getting yourself into. The rejections you get might not be based on your skill, and it could just be, the odds. So don't get down on yourself. Just keep practicing, keep submitting your portfolio, and eventually you're going to land something. Okay, let's get into the tips. I talked to a legendary TV character designer. He's worked in the industry for like 30 years. I'll let him introduce himself. I'm sure you know his work. Some of his tips may be a little bit different than what you might hear online. So pay attention.
I'm Chris Battle, and I'm a character designer, mainly in television animation. Most of you have probably seen my work in a lot of classic Cartoon Network shows like Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, and Samurai Jack, and even newer shows like Teen Titans Go. If you're a beginning designer, yeah, turnarounds are a big deal because a lot of times, you know, the head artist will be designing the character. You'll just be doing turnarounds maybe and special poses. But yeah, turnarounds is a good thing. But I mean, posed out characters is cool because then that shows you know how to put a lot of personality and you know how to maybe do action poses and things like that. Sometimes it's a good thing to have a bunch of different designs for a similar character, kind of not unlike development. If you're just showing, oh, this is a little girl character and she's very adventurous or something, maybe just like, okay, you got to draw different kinds of little girls with different kind of hair, different clothes. Are they tall? Are they short? You know, all these little things, different shapes, stuff like that. You know, because a lot of times, you know, you have to do several different passes on a character. You just want to show that you're not locked into one style. Something like you don't need to have like the zoo sketches or things like that. And most places won't need that. I mean, if you have a page of really interesting animals done maybe stylistically, you know, if you have, or here's my very you know, Warner Brothers style ones, and this is my Disney feature one. This is my anime action show elephants, or here's like a cartoony Samurai Jack kind of style or something, you know, depending on what you're looking for. But if you can just show some basic stylized animals or something, that's good. But the zoo sketches, I don't think most people use those. So you can have black and white stuff, color stuff, you know, try to just make the pages look interesting, I guess, for sure. And don't just have, here's just a flat drawing just sitting there. It's like, try to play with the layout so it looks maybe like a really good page out of an art of book. Little expressions is a good thing too. You know, if you have a page of just heads of the character showing expressions, that's a good thing too.
And it should be all, just to be clear, all character designs. Don't include any like storyboards in your portfolio.
Oh no, I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, it all matters how good you are at all those things. Because if you're really good at character design, but you're not very good at portfolio, you might be weakening your own chances because they're like confused by what you're looking at. Or, you know, maybe you only get a post, you know, 5 pages to a website. Well, you're really limiting your chances if you're not showing all of your really awesome character design by like putting 2 pages of like storyboard stuff.
So there you have it. Those are some tips to help you beef up your character design portfolio. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. You might not have noticed, but the new trailer for Garfield continues a shameless trend in modern animation. And before you ask, it has nothing to do with Chris Pratt voicing a character. With this new Garfield movie, we're introduced to Baby Garfield, a cute and cuddly version of the famous cat. This baby trend has been going on for a while. We got Baby Scooby, Baby Snoopy, Baby Dory, Baby Mike, Baby Grinch. Well, maybe not him. It seems like every animated movie now needs a cutesy baby version of the characters, and it makes sense.
Take a look at the proportions of an adult versus a baby. If you saw a 2-meter tall thing like that walking down the street, it would be terrifying. But when they fit in your arms, they're terribly, terribly cute. Why are characters cute? Because of their proportions. Babies have big heads, small faces. Their eyes look big because their faces are so small. And of course, their hands and bodies look big and chunky. Now, these are what we like to refer to in art as the cutification factors. They are very, very powerful things that really grab onto our brains.
This is the secret way professional animators find jobs. The animation industry is crazy right now. Over the last year, countless productions have been canceled, and artists all over have been hit with layoffs. And the competition, y'all, is more intense than ever. If you go to a job posting on LinkedIn, it will have like 1 million applicants in like 30 seconds. If you are looking to find a job, I suggest looking at the spreadsheet, which is constantly updated with new jobs from all over the world. After getting laid off from his job in 2016, Chris Main decided to make a list of all the jobs to help himself and his coworkers get back on their feet. The list has since grown to over 1,500 jobs and is updated really frequently. They have tons of listings for creative positions like character designer, storyboard artists, 3D animators, and they also have more technical jobs like rigging, lighting, texturing, all that stuff. The best part is finding the spreadsheet is super easy. So one time, Miyazaki absolutely roasted this kid's art, but in the process taught him a very valuable animation lesson. Back in the day, while working on one of their films, all of the new artists at Studio Ghibli were asked to create drawings based on the theme of eating. All of the artists do their thing and eventually pin their work up for Miyazaki to look at.
It's his response to one particular artist I think is interesting. First, he looked at the art and then immediately noticed something. Instead of saying what it was, he had the artist sit down in a chair and act like he was eating. And Miyazaki encouraged him to make an observation. Unlike in his drawing, there was a lot of space between him and the table. This is what Miyazaki is best at. He's really good at observing real life and putting it into his art. He thinks all animators need to be good at one thing, which is making observations. Another time he encouraged observation was years later while working on his first CGI film. In a similar situation as before, the artist was tasked with showing him some of their work. The scene was of a little creature coming to life for the first time and looking around. While the first take might look fine to us, Miyazaki saw something that he wanted to change. The character's movement wasn't authentic. He explained that the character's head was moving around too fast and too focused. Newborn babies don't have that much dexterity. So for the next take, the animator added more childlike movement, and it turned out way better. Miyazaki is an animation master. I don't have to tell you that. One of the things that always stood out to me was how he always pushes new artists to be better. If you are a big Miyazaki fan and kind of want to learn how to animate like him, there's actually a document online that shows how he animates walk cycles and stuff like that. It's a really cool resource because it goes into the timing and the drawings that it takes to make a character move Studio Ghibli style. So you should definitely check that out. In the comments below, let me know what your favorite Miyazaki movie is and if you think his new film has a chance of winning the Oscar. I'll see you guys in the next video.
こういうのはね、観察で書いてないんだよ。こういうもんだと思って書いてるわけ。
This guy created some of the best cartoons of your childhood, and now he's teaching you how to do it for free. This is Joe Murray. He's the guy that created Rocko's Modern Life for Nickelodeon and Camp Lazlo for Cartoon Network. In his book, Creating Cartoons with Character is a must-read for any beginning animator or somebody who wants to make their own animated series. It's jam-packed with details and lessons learned from the production of not only Camp Lazlo, but Rocko's Modern Life as well. So this is crazy because the book was first published in 2010 and has since gone out of print. As a result, a lot of the resellers are taking advantage of everybody that wants to read it by selling copies at a crazy price. Now, Joe Murray is offering a digital copy for you as a free download. As payment, he just wants you to do something nice. Donate to a food bank or find a way to pay it forward somehow. Even though some of his streaming and broadcasting information is a little bit out of date at this point, and his show Let's Go Luna isn't included here, much of the information is still super relevant. So you gotta check it out. Shout out to Joe Murray for saving us all $300. And to get access to the book, all you have to do is go visit his website, which you can see right here. This is the advice I really wish I listened to when older animators told me when I was younger. If you're watching this video, you probably love animation as much as I do. When I wanted to get into the industry, I knew it was gonna be a fun thing to do, but I also knew some of the downsides. You hear a lot about the low wages or the tight deadlines and crunch and that kind of stuff. And those things are bad. But no one ever talks about this really bad thing that can happen to you if you work in animation. I went to USC for animation, and all throughout school, one of our teachers always encouraged us to move around and always take the stairs wherever you go. And when you're young, you don't worry about it, but as you get older, you realize animation takes a toll on your body physically. Having to sitting down and drawing all day can really wear out your body, especially when you're doing it under an intense studio deadline. I didn't realize that animating can actually cause you injuries. If you're drawing all day, you can get injuries like carpal tunnel, tendinitis, and other types of strains and pains all over your body. A couple things you can do to help prevent this stuff is to do exercises. Doing movements like the ones I have on screen now will help you in the long run. Watch your posture and watch how you're drawing. Make sure you're developing healthy drawing habits. Another thing you can do to help yourself out is to adjust your settings on your digital tablets and styluses and stuff like that. Try to make the settings as gentle as possible so it doesn't require a lot of heavy, hard movement. Take a look at this post here. You can even wrap your stylus in some foam like this person did here. Make sure you aren't pressing too hard when you're drawing. And remember, always draw from the shoulder, not from the wrist. In the comments below, let me know if you experience any drawing-related pain.
This Disney animator was overworked and really struggling.
I'm working late every week. You're doing all this extra work.
He was shocked when he discovered a new drawing technique that let him work faster, but also draw better. This mind-blowing technique was super simple, but it took his career to the next level. So real quick, this is Scott O'Brien. He's worked on tons of stuff, but had a major problem. After decades of working for some of the best animation studios, he realized he was drawing completely wrong. While storyboarding on a new show, his drawings took forever to make, yet they were still kind of dull. His co-workers who weren't classically trained animators had drawings that are super fun and expressive and made really quickly. That's when he realized they were drawing in a way he hadn't seen before. I'll let him explain.
They were drawing in a way that, as an animator, there's no way I would ever have even thought of it, where they draw the eyes first, and then the contour of the body around that. It really just changed everything. I was drawing them like this. I was drawing like an animator, doing structure. But when I started drawing the eyes first, it became personality-based. Instantly changed my whole life, really.
This storyboard from the Super Mario movie is awesome and you gotta check it out. So when the Mario movie came out last year, it took the internet by storm. There's tons of videos, tons of memes, but somehow I missed this post. So this is Guy Borelli, a director and storyboard artist who worked on the Mario movie at Illumination. He's worked on a bunch of cool projects, like Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, The Grinch. His coolest project yet was definitely the Mario movie. This storyboard right here is super awesome. It's a super dynamic sequence that has tons of action, crazy camera work, and is also really fun. Most of the time, storyboards are done in either Photoshop or Toon Boom, but for this sequence, he actually made it in Blender. To make this sequence, Guy modeled everything himself. Even though it was his first time using Blender, his modeling work was so good, they used his Blender models for the final set. I know it looks awesome, but it definitely wasn't easy. As you can see from his caption, it was a lot of work, but also really fun. With Baymax, Disney animators proved you aren't ugly, it's just bad lighting. So the animators obviously wanted to make Baymax adorable. As we talked about, they gave him a simple face and a round body that was based on cutting-edge soft robotics. They also used cute toddlers and penguins as the inspiration for his movement. But even that wasn't enough. Check this out. Do you notice the differences? With Baymax, the animators needed to ultimately rely on lighting to make him look as cute as possible. You see, most animated movies at the time only have 1 or 2 lights in a scene. While it works for normal characters, with Baymax, it made him look dirty and cold. You don't want to hug this guy. So as a result, each scene with Baymax broke computers by having 10 lights. When the light fills the scene, Baymax gets way more cute, way more cuddly. Just goes to prove the power of lighting. Disney still makes 2D animation, they just don't want us to see it. It's been a long time since Disney released a movie made in the traditional hand-drawn animation style. Even though they make everything CGI, they still make 2D animation. They did it for Encanto, they did it for Frozen, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, and Moana. Look at how amazing this stuff is. So why don't they make the full animated movies like this? Well, it's because this animation is just used to help the CGI animators understand the characters better. Legendary Disney animator Randy Haycock explains how this all goes down.
They asked if I would do some animation tests on Frozen. They had cast a voice for Anna and they wanted to do a test with her to kind of explore her acting and her personality. When I did that first test, I started getting emails from the CG animators about how much they were inspired by that piece of animation. Now they were excited to work on the movie, and that made me feel really good. For me, that was kind of the big reward in the initial stages of this experiment that Disney's done, having 2D animators work on behind the scenes on these CG films.
Do you remember this scene in Big Hero 6? The inspiration behind it is so obvious, I can't believe I didn't realize it. So besides being adorable, Baymax is also a major source of physical comedy in the movie. His movements are small but hilarious, like this, or this, and of course this. The animators really wanted him to have an adorable walk, but they couldn't figure out the right inspiration. Watch the scene again. What is Baymax moving like? First, they based him off of a penguin. You can tell by how he kind of flops his arms around like wings. They also gave him the attitude of like a toddler who has his diaper full too. And now I can't not see it. I don't know why I didn't recognize it immediately. So now that you know, I gotta ask. Apparently, this Disney animator upset his director by doing something unheard of, making a cartoon that was too cartoony. This animator's sassy response to a director's note was hilarious and low-key legendary. So let's go back. Old school Disney animators were the best of the best. Walt was like Nick Fury and assembled a team of rockstar animators. If you saw these dudes, you knew they were about to drop a banger. From Snow White to Pinocchio, Cinderella, and Jungle Book, these animators are a big part of why classic Disney movies are so good. So this guy is Ward Kimball. He was kind of the funny character specialist and was super creative. He was known for having tons of new crazy ideas, but one time he went too far. Do you remember this song from the Three Caballeros? So Kimball wanted to spice up the animation by having the characters break the laws of reality. They disappeared, teleported across screen, cartoon stuff. But the director didn't like it. He wanted the scene changed because it wasn't logical. Ward's response was great.
The director saw the pencil test as, you can't do that, you have to make sense. And I said, look, who cares? That gives it its flavor, its craziness.
You didn't notice, but this is the most controversial scene in Aladdin. I can't believe everyone reacted this way. At this point, we all know that Disney animators sneak little adult humor in their movies, and Aladdin is no different. They had some moments like this, yet I was surprised to find out that this scene is what the directors didn't like. Let's go back. Do you recognize this moment between Jafar and Jasmine? Of all the things, this drawing right here caused controversy. I'll let the animator explain.
On Aladdin, I had a scene with Jafar. I remember it was a close-up where he's talking to Princess Jasmine.
What was his crime?
And his answer was,
the boy was a criminal.
And I saw a grin at the end of that scene. And John Musker saw that. He said, oh, he's grinning at the end. I didn't see that. He at least said, well, let's just live with it for a while and see it in screenings, and then it stayed on. And by adding a grin, basically saying, the boy was a criminal, you stupid little girl. It's what I was trying to get.
Disney animators are super lazy. They're just really good at hiding it. Here's one example from this iconic movie. You'll never see this scene the same way again. So Disney animators are the best in the world. They've created amazing characters and stories for over 100 years. Disney is so good that they make drawing an entire movie look easy, but it's actually not. Animating is hard, but certain things are really hard. Things like characters walking or big crowds are really hard to do. Animating walks is easy to mess up, and drawing tons of characters for crowds is never fun. So when it came time to animate an entire village mob in Beauty and the Beast, the animators struggled. How were they going to do it? Well, they didn't. They're lazy, remember? They focused on the important scenes like this or this. Then they got creative to finish the mob scene cheaply. The director explained how they cut corners.
One of the big ending numbers of Beauty and the Beast, you've got like a whole village of people tromping up the mountain to go kill the beast. We cut to hands holding swords, we cut to shadows on the wall, anything to avoid having to animate 20 characters marching across a background on one.
A massive earthquake hit Disney when they were making The Lion King, but you've never heard this crazy story. So a few months before The Lion King came out, everyone was in crunch mode. They were drawing non-stop on scenes, finalizing songs, and doing, this. But everything stopped when suddenly a huge earthquake hit Los Angeles, and it was bad. Tons of casualties and damages. There was no power or water all over the city. It was a complete state of emergency. Watching the movie today, you would have never expected that so much craziness was going on behind the scenes. This unexpected event created huge problems for the production. Freeways were destroyed, so obviously artists couldn't get to the studio, and the entire production was in jeopardy. The movie came out and it became iconic. So what happened? How'd they do it? The deadline wasn't changing and the pressure was on. So to finish the movie, the Disney artists did something unheard of at the time. But remember, there was no internet back then, so things were super complicated. They had to gather up all their drawings and equipment and mail them across LA. Animators actually finished the highest grossing animated movie of all time while working from home, just like in 2020. Even though the movie totally flopped, Strange World was really fun to animate. Here's why Disney animators loved working on the movie. So look at this scene. Do you notice anything about the creatures? Early on, the filmmakers decided that no creature will have a face. And that little detail got animators excited. Without having that, the animation team had a huge challenge, especially for the character Splat. Turns out they drew inspiration from another classic silent Disney character, the carpet from Aladdin. Having to figure out how to make the characters work was hard, but the limitations created a chance to try new things. And as a result, the team had way more fun getting creative with the characters. You won't recognize his face, but this Disney animator has had one of the coolest careers. He animates stuff like this, but started out doing this. So this is Zach Parrish. He started his animation career on those old Alvin and the Chipmunk movies, but has been animating at Disney on back-to-back bangers for the last 15 years or so. True Disney fans will also recognize the short films he directed. When it comes to CGI animation, this dude has done it all. His incredible success is based on his simple philosophy: don't be afraid to suck. On his website, he has an entire section dedicated to his student animation work. He admits it's mostly pretty terrible, but you have to start somewhere. Most pros try to hide their early work, but Parrish keeps it up so others can see his journey. If you click up, you can see his reels from his more professional work, and the contrast is just wow. You won't be good overnight. He wrote, "Don't be afraid to suck. This is my go-to advice for new animators. From 2004, 2008, I tried to do as much animation as I possibly could. Most of it was terrible, but with every shot, I learned big lessons that would carry onto my next shot. You have to keep your head up and keep charging ahead. Your next shot is going to be better for it. Disney animators were pushed to the limit to make this movie.
The bitter reality of just like, you have to stop crying. You have to get this done.
This is what really happened behind the scenes of a Disney classic. Okay, so this is Dean and Chris, and they made Lilo and Stitch. When they directed the movie over 20 years ago, wow, they had two goals. Make a great movie, which they did. I mean, they even have a remake coming out. But the second goal was something more important than the movie. After the struggle of working on Mulan, they wanted a more positive experience for their movie.
No one is going to get a divorce because of this movie. No one's going to get sick because of this movie.
But their plan horribly backfired. While most of the crew enjoyed their time, Chris struggled.
We would sit and do our directing stuff all day long. Then at night, we would have to do our storyboards. So we would begin boarding like at 10 p.m., exhausted. You just keep drawing because you're like, this has to be done by tomorrow morning. Crew needs it.
It sounds bad, but they actually look back at it and laugh.
I was talking to Dean, and it was late at night, and he said, well, I have to get off the phone so I can be crying by 3 a.m. And I didn't know that Dean was going through the same thing. That wasn't every week or every night, but that was a labor of love for us.
Have you ever noticed Mufasa's smile? This tiny detail is a big part of why the character is so iconic. Let me explain. So Mufasa is known for being a great king, having an amazing voice, and for this. Emotional damage. But it turns out, he was a really hard character to create. The animator studied real lions and gave Mufasa exaggerated arms and shoulders just to make sure he feels strong and regal. But then, casting James Earl Jones took things to the next level.
Look inside yourself, Simba.
But all of this caused a major problem. Mufasa wasn't very likable. During the final recording session, James and the animators made a small change to his character and ended up creating Disney magic.
My first mistake was to try to make him regal, which meant I had to act grand and important. And what they really needed was something more like me. We had decided that Mufasa, more important than being a king, he was a papa. So I'd come down off the king star, just be kind of dopey. I'm really a dopey dad. You know, my kind of dopey grin is what they used on the animators used in the image of Mufasa.
Disney paid animators to not make a character move. It was crazy and a huge risk.
Quite frankly, I was terrified.
But it led to creating one of the most unique and iconic characters of all time. So let's go back. Disney animators are the best in the world when it comes to creating fluid and expressive animation. These guys take movement seriously. So you might have noticed that every Disney character moves differently, even ones from the same movie.
If you look at Winnie the Pooh, he animates his walk with very stiff legs because he is a stuffed bear. With a character like Rabbit, he's more of a real rabbit, so you can animate him more fluidly.
The level of detail is mind-blowing, but also really hard. But things got even more complicated when this director had a genius idea. He created a character that didn't need to be animated. While working on this movie, they broke all the rules, and animators were actually encouraged to animate less and less.
Like, people would be like, oh, I haven't animated Baymax yet, and we're like, yes!
This is one of the tiny details that made Baymax so iconic.
Keeping everything very still, very symmetrical, and separating out movement. He would turn his head and then wave.
Do you notice when animators do stuff like this? They sneak these funny drawings in and you hardly ever realize. It's hilarious, but doing this actually caused controversy behind the scenes.
They were always critical.
Pausing animation to find funny drawings is always entertaining. 1 second you're watching a serious character, the next is this. But when older animators noticed this happening, they weren't happy.
Well, we wouldn't have done it that way.
Back in the day when the younger Disney animators started doing this, it absolutely shocked the older animators. It's not just funny faces either. These new animators weren't afraid to make their characters look kind of, well, ugly. I'll let Disney legend Glenn Keane explain.
After Little Mermaid, I said, so, what did you think? And Ollie said, there was times there where she just was not very appealing. There was some pretty ugly expression. And I realized, yeah, anytime we had a choice between pretty or real, we always chose real. Ariel was a real teenage girl with frustrations and anger and all those kinds of things. They were animating in a different era with a different taste. Ariel was much more in my time.
Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories. Making Moana almost broke Disney.
This movie was very much a struggle.
There were so many failures behind the scenes that they almost ran out of time to make the movie. This is the legendary story of how the entire studio locked in and at the last minute created one of the movie's best scenes. Okay, so here's a rundown. This is John Musker. He directed Moana, and he explained how there were a lot of struggles making Moana. Like, a lot. first, getting the characters' personalities right was a challenge.
Kept going around on her. How selfless is she? How selfish is she? Molly was a challenge because he was kind of an egomaniac and it was so unsympathetic.
But the hardest thing to get right wasn't what you might expect.
It's not the animation, it's not the ocean, it's not the tattoos. It's the friggin' story!
It was a team effort. Writers and directors from all over Disney came together to perfect the story, and they were working up to the last minute. Even with that deadline quickly approaching, they managed to create one of the best scenes.
Now the paint is still wet when the movie gets in the theater sometimes, and one of the last sequences we animated was the Tomatoma song, Shiny.
These guys accidentally wrote the funniest scene in Disney animation history. This iconic scene went insanely viral, but the crazy story about how they created it makes everything even more legendary. So real quick, you remember this scene from Zootopia, right? It's great, but behind the scenes, it caused some problems. Everyone who heard the idea loved it, and it kept getting funnier and funnier.
We had a meeting about, well, what are some funny things in the city that animals could do? And she could meet a sloth that works at the DMV. And everything stopped.
This hilarious scene went viral, so you might think it took a lot of planning, but it turns out the scene was actually written super quickly.
I swear, like in that 90 minutes, we kind of performed out loud, verbatim, what the scene is right now.
This spontaneous energy was great, but it created a lot of problems when they had to animate it. I'll let the directors explain.
Then began the long journey of, okay, now we got a board and now we have to record it. And how do we keep that same spark? It's supposed to look spontaneous on the screen, but the process of animation, there could be nothing more non-spontaneous.
This guy makes incredible animation on his Nintendo DS. It's a lot of work, but the final results will blow your mind. So this guy is Wayne Unton. He's been working as an animator at Disney since 2005. You probably recognize some of the scenes he animated. He was the guy who was in charge of animating Elsa in Frozen 2. While he uses the most advanced technology to bring characters to life at work, at home, it's a totally different story. He uses a bunch of different techniques to make cool animation. He does cool stuff like this and this, but his animation on his DS is awesome. I feel like we all tried animating on a DS, but this guy takes it to the next level. He uses his game system to make animation on the go, but it's crazy what he can do. He first draws the rough sketches, and then he goes back and animates the drawings frame by frame. And of course, the internet has gone crazy for his stuff. I don't know about you, but basically all of my DS animations look like this. But his stuff looks like this, and this, and this. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories. This Disney animator snapped when he got feedback from his boss.
I say, is this what you want?
Usually, animation executives give terrible notes, but this time, I kind of agree. So let's go back. This is Andreas Deja, a legendary Disney animator. He's the guy who animated these characters. But one of the hardest characters for him to create was Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. When he first started drawing him, he gave him really cartoony features. But when the producer of the movie, Jeffrey Katzenberg, saw it, he wasn't satisfied. He wanted Gaston to be more handsome.
The soap opera star is the villain? How is that gonna work?
Over and over and over again, Katzenberg insisted that Gaston must be handsome. Deja tried to explain that if you make him handsome, he'd be really hard to draw.
And I said, but if he's handsome, that's gonna make it so much more difficult. And Jeffrey said, well, nobody said it was gonna be easy. And that was the end of the meeting.
So they ended up making a handsome Gaston. But why was being handsome so important? Well, it's simple and kind of genius. You see, the Beast looks scary, but has a heart of gold. And Gaston looks good, but is truly evil on the inside. All of this plays into the movie's theme of looks can be deceiving. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes animation stories.